Now it is our pleasure to welcome the main speaker, John F. from Calabasas.
I don't know what's going on here. I feel like I'm at like a Daft Punk show with all this music. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Michael, for having me. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm from Calabasas, or as my friend from Ohio that just came to visit me last year drove through Old Town Calabasas and got to my house and said, "It's such a lovely city you live in, Calabasas." And I'm like, cool. So yeah, all the way from Calabasas. Thank you, Nick, for driving me, and I appreciate it. Congratulations on 30 days, buddy. And congratulations to all the newcomers and chip takers. Happy birthday, Cliff. Yeah, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never say no to an AA request. That's not true. That is not true. They asked me to speak at this musicians meeting in Venice last year, and I said, sure, no problem, whatever. And then they said, you have to sing your share. I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do that. But everything okay over there? Oh, coffee spilled, I know. Drama at an AA meeting, I love it, it's the best. I have a sobriety date. It's February 19th of 1989. I'm sober 34 years. I got sober when I was 21, and I'm 55 now. And I go to a meeting every day, except when I don't. I go to a lot of meetings. And that's what is, it's the foundation of my program. I go through the steps every year, and I love AA. I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. I was at a meeting at the Mustard Seed in New York City a couple years ago, and I just find whatever God is shows up in AA meetings. I was at this meeting downstairs, the basement of this apartment complex, and it was just a perfect AA meeting. Just smelled like AA coffee and mold. It was just, I was, right at home, and half the people are homeless people sitting, at the meeting. The other half are guys in suits going to work. And it was just the perfect blend, and it's a round robin style meeting. And I was just thinking, I was just thinking about me. I'm visiting from LA. What am I going to bring my LA sobriety to this New York group? And they're going around the room, and there's a homeless guy sitting next to me, and I'm going, what's this guy going to, get to me. I was just self-centered that day. And they get to him, and he's just like, he has all of his belongings in this plastic bag underneath his chair, right? And he goes, I'm so-and-so, I'm from the Bronx. And he goes, AA is like McDonald's. And at the time, I was this devout vegan, so I was like, what are you talking about? AA is like McDonald's. He goes, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, is like Burger King. He goes, Burger King is good, but it's never going to be McDonald's. Thanks for letting me share. I'm like, dude, that is the best share I have ever heard, ever, in AA. I'm like, how am I going to follow that, It was just like, I don't know when it's, they say don't leave before the miracle. I don't know when that miracle is going to happen. I just got to stay sober, one day at a time. And life just works out. If I put AA first, family second, and work third, my life always works out. And I don't go tell my wife, you're second place. It's not like that. It's just, I have to be sober in order to take care of my family. There's no other way. AA first, family second, work third. And I put work first all the time. And I get anxiety and insomnia and all sorts of weird shit. And then I put AA first again, and everything just works out. And they said, get a sobriety date, write it on the front page of your big book. And that's what I did, February 19th of 1989. They say, protect that date with everything that you can. And that's what I've done. It's like, I don't ever want to go back to that life. I don't ever want to go back to that life that I had. I have two kids that I live with, and I've got an older kid that lives in Santa Cruz. And my 14-year-old daughter's, she's totally into TikTok. I mean, she's 14. She's like, she's a surfer. She calls me bruh. It's like, I don't want to go to school, bruh. Anyway, it's like, She just did her first surf competition last month, and she came in fourth place. This is her first surf competition, out of 5 people, but whatever. It's like she showed up and did it. It's like, my son's 17 and he's driving now, and it's just wild. Like, this life that I have everything in my life should have a bumper sticker that says property of Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything is because I'm sober. I get to show up, and it's just incredible. I just keep going to meetings and my life gets better. I was with my family last year in the middle of England, in the middle of nowhere. And we were coming from London. It was 2-hour train ride outside at this train station called Charlbury, in the middle of nowhere, right? Like literally, like just fields of just wheat and grass everywhere. And we're the only family there. It's like my 2 kids, my wife, me, and then this other family comes. We're waiting for our train. This other family comes, and it's a husband, wife, and 2 kids, just like ours. And they just come in huddling in this little area of shade. It was 110 degrees, the hottest day of the year in England. And we're huddling in this little shady area. So, I mean, typically I kind of hate people in general. So I'm like, but I got to talk to them because they're in this little thing. And I'm talking to the guy. I'm like, how was your trip? And whatever, and I just didn't even think anything about it. I didn't say AA or talk about, I just asked him how his day was. We got on our trains and we left. And, 3 months ago, this friend of mine just says, hey, can I bring I have a meeting at my house. I've had a meeting at my house for 20 years. This guy says, can I bring a newcomer? I said, sure. He's like, it's his first AA meeting and his first day sober, shows up at my house. It's the same dude from the train station, shows up at my house. Is it odd or is it God? Like, these things happen. He looks at me and he goes, were you at this train station in the middle of England? I'm like, dude, and he's at my house, the other side of the planet. Like, it's just wild how we connect these things. I was at this meeting in Germany, and it was like I was working on the road, and I couldn't find. This is the only meeting I could find. It was like a 2-hour taxi ride to get to this meeting. And we get there, and I find out once I get there, it's a 2-hour German-speaking meeting with no timer and no break, right? Best kind of meetings ever. So I'm sitting there, and they're going around the room, everyone's sharing and in German, and I don't speak German, so I'm just like, whatever. And they're going around the room, and they get to me, and I say, I'm John, I'm an alcoholic, I'm visiting from Los Angeles. And I just shared in English for like 2 minutes, like, whatever I just shared. And then the next guy after me, he shares his name, and he says he's an alcoholic in English, and he says, I want to take a vote to see if we can share the rest of the meeting in English for our American visitor. Like, only in AA does this happen. And they took a vote. Everyone voted except this one German guy. He's like, 9. He was so pissed. He was so pissed. He was just like, just sitting there, and they shared arguably the worst English I've ever heard for the rest of the meeting. And it was just like incredible. It was just incredible. I just go to meetings, and like these things just happen. And I'm in the middle of a 4-step right now. I'm doing a step study at my house with a bunch of guys I sponsor, and we're on step 4 right now. And I was just thinking, they say resentments are the number 1 offender, is what it says in our book. It causes more people to drink than anything else, is resentments. And we must be rid of them at once, it says. And so I've had this kid that worked for me for a while, and he left on really bad terms. It just wasn't good, and I tried making amends. It never happened, and so I've been praying for this kid, right? Because that's what they say. You pray for their health, happiness, success, everything that you want for you. You pray for them. And I went after this job, and he ended up, getting the job. This kid that I trained out of nothing, told him how to make coffee, and he learned and became this, this producer. And he just like got this job I was going for. And I went back to my sponsor, and I'm just like, I've been praying for his health, happiness, success, everything I want for me. And this kid got the job. He's like, do it another 2 weeks, man, another 2 weeks. The book says, the prescription for the resentment. You pray for their health, happiness, success for 2 weeks. I went for another 2 weeks, prayed for the kid. And prayed for him. Then he just got this job 3 months ago producing the Rolling Stones, right? And I'm like, and I called Peter Miller, my friend in AA. He goes, stop praying for the kid, man. So I did. I feel way better. And that's just the truth, you know? It's like sometimes it just takes what it takes. And I don't know. I just love AA so much. And I don't know. I keep going to meetings and my life just gets better. I don't, you know, my father was the last man to contract polio in America. So he was in a wheelchair since he was 17. And, you know, he was a very strict guy, and not why I'm alcoholic. He only let us listen to musicals when I was growing up, which is definitely why I'm alcoholic, for sure. And, you know, it was all just Oklahoma, Sound of Music, Music Man, whatever. It was all that. And it's come to grow on me as I've gotten older with my own kids. But at the time, I'm like, anyway, and I didn't know that I had this, you know, as a kid. I was just sitting there actually this morning at my home group meeting in the Palisades, and I was sitting there, and I had my short sleeve shirt on. I see, like, I hated myself so much when I was a kid. I couldn't stand looking myself in the mirror. I hated who I was. I used to cut myself with razor blades. I still have all these scars on my arm from it, you know, from when I was a kid. And AA has completely changed my life. I love who I am. This is the first 4-step. I've done a 4-step every year since I've been sober for 34 years. This is the first 4-step. My father wasn't on and I wasn't on. And that is huge growth. AA really works. It just works. I know how to take care of myself now. I didn't know how to do that when I was growing up or a kid or whatever. The first time I drank, I was in Santa Cruz at the beach, and it was like a bonfire on the beach, and I was going into high school. I was 13, and I blacked out, and I came out of the blackout, and I was making out with this one girl that was a sophomore and one girl that was a junior in high school, and it was, just a moment of silence for that. I was just, I love my wife. I love my wife, and that was a really good day, and I knew that, you know, I'm like, this is what I want to do. When the big book talks about, you know, in Bill's story, he talks about driving through Ohio trying to find investment opportunities for all of his highfalutin friends back in New York with Lois on the sidecar. He says, I had arrived, you know. That day I had arrived. Like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. I shaved my head. I put a safety pin in my ear, and I just became a punk rock kid. And I just like ran the streets of this little suburban town called Saratoga up north. And I just like, that's all we did, is we just broke into houses, just robbed people for their alcohol, stole cars, and just smashed windows. And we were just derelicts. And it was incredibly fun in the beginning. And they say alcoholism is fun with problems, and then just problems. In the beginning, it was just amazing. And all this pressure, you know, my dad expected, you know, me to be this, he used his mind to overcome polio, and he became a nuclear physicist, and he was the smartest guy I had ever met. And he had all these expectations for me to become an engineer as well, and I just wasn't built to do that. And all that stuff was just gone when I drank. It was just like I just was free. And what happened is the fun with problems started happening, and I got I got kicked out of high school, and when I was 16, I got this girl pregnant who had my daughter, who's now 38, and it was like, at the time, I was so ashamed of this secret that I had. I had this secret that I didn't tell anybody about, that I had this kid that I'd never met. And I moved to San Diego, and I was reading that book, No One Here Gets Out Alive, that Jim Morrison book, and I thought I was this like Jim Morrison character reincarnated. But at the time, I was going to Tijuana every weekend. So everything I had on, I'd bought in Tijuana, with my leather pants, my cowboy boots, and my leather vest with no shirt on underneath. Just like, I had this long hair, but I looked nothing like Jim Morrison. I looked like a fat, bloated, drunk Bret Michaels is exactly what I looked like. Exactly. And it was like, And I'm running the streets, and I'm dating this little hippie girl in Ocean Beach down there, and she's never cut her hair's down to her knees. She's never shaved her legs. I could like brush her leg hair like a little kitten, and her name was Kimba, like the Lion King. Anyway, I got arrested in Rosarito. That was no fun, and I started getting really sick. When I was 17, I went to the doctor, and I went on this 3-day bender, and I came out of it, and I was really, really sick, and my eyes were yellow. I went to the doctor, and he said, you have an ulcer, and your liver is 3 centimeters bigger than it should be, and you've got first stages of cirrhosis of the liver. He said, if you continue drinking the way you're drinking, you'll be dead before you're 30. And at the time I was 17, and I'm like, who would ever want to live to be 30, ever? Are you kidding me, And I just, I went to one meeting with my mom back then. All my mom's sisters were sober. My Aunt Ruthie's my Eskimo, who passed away last year. And, I went to this one meeting, and, like I said, back then I was this punk rock kid, and everyone in the meeting had like Led Zeppelin and Rush t-shirts in this young people's meeting, and I'm like, these are not my people at all. And my mom sits down next to me, and they say, are there any newcomers? And my mom nudged me. I said, I'm John. I'm probably an alcoholic. And then she stands up and says, I'm Sue, and I'm John's mom. And I'm like, I'm never coming back ever to AA. This is so lame. And, so I'm down in San Diego, and I'm drinking, and I moved to LA. I get this job on Melrose at a store called Aardvarks, this used clothing store. And what happened? What happened? Part of my story is, Kimba left me for my drinking. I came up with this plan. I got fired from Aardvarks, which is like, I don't know how you get fired from Aardvarks. I mean, the manager of the store was the Coke dealer for all of Melrose back in the 80s, and I got fired. And and so I came up with a plan. I was pretty much done. I'd been to jail a few times, and I was kind of, I was 21, and I hated my life. And I just went to my roommate had just won tickets to see The Cure. So I stole his car keys. I stole these tickets. I went to San Diego State to go see this goth band, to get depressed enough to kill myself, seeing this goth band. That was my plan. I get a DUI instead. I go to jail, and they said, you can either go to AA and get your court card signed, or you can stay in jail. And I said, I'll go get the court card signed. And I went to the whatever group on Melrose and Mansfield on February 19th of 1989. And that's been my sobriety date. And, and I've just been going to AA ever since. And, what happened is my sponsor, John Kimball, he told me that we have a principle in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we're self-supporting through our own contributions. And he said, you need to go beg for your job back at Aardvarks, which is what I did. I went back to that store, and I begged for my job back, and miracles happened in AA. They gave me my job back, my $4 an hour job back, and I was like, thank you, God. And from that job, I got a better job at American Rag, and I got a better job at this place called Nana on the Promenade selling shoes. And I was, and because of that meeting, I found my home group, this men's group called Mario's. And Mario started at noon. It would be over at 1. I'd have lunch, and I'd go to work at 2:30 to 11. And then I'd go play in my, band after work, and that's what I did every day. I went to that meeting, I went to work, and I went to rehearse. My sponsor said, we are sober to be able to follow our dreams. That's what we're sober for, to do whatever we want in life, as long as you're willing to pay the consequences. And, that's what I did. I slept for 2 hours a night, and I just worked, and I just showed up at that shoe store job. And because of Mario's, the first time I ever went there, this guy, Bob Horrigan, started it, and he was this guy probably, 80, and he would say, my name's Bob. I may not look like one, but I'm an alcoholic. And I'd sit in the back of the room, and I would just think, I've never seen anyone that looks more like an alcoholic than you, Bob. Just see this guy up there. And these guys all had these catchphrases, and they just changed the whole trajectory of my life. They taught me how to be a father later in life. They taught me how to be a husband. They just taught me everything that I needed in life, this men's group. And I'd go to work, and then this one day, this guy came in. He goes, hey, man, I know you from this band you used to be in. Like, what are you doing now? And I had this little demo cassette it was like a lectern like this. I had a little cassette tape. If you don't know what a cassette tape is, you can fuck off. And I stuck my demo cassette in his shoebox, and he signed me to a record deal, And had I not been at that job, being self-supporting through my own contributions, doing the next indicated action, that's all I needed to do was the next indicated action. That's it. That's all. That's what AA had taught me up until that point. It was the next indicated action. My life would have never worked out. That was in 1993, and I've been doing music as a career ever since. I was 4 or 5 years sober when that happened, And it's like, and my life worked out the way it did because I was at that shoe store. I had to meet that guy at that time. Is it Otto or is it God? There's no mistake in God's world. That's been my experience for 34 years. There's no mistakes, and it's like I've been through. So I met my wife in New Jersey, and we've been together for 26 years, and it's like only because of AA. If I, one day at a time, if I they say, it's like, have I survived this thing? Because, neither of us have wanted to get divorced the same day, but it's like, it's not being married, it's very challenging being married to me, an alcoholic, she's a normie, and it's like, I've got, some days I'm just I drink a lot of coffee, and she's like, it's time to go to bed, John, and I just lay there, and I'm like, are you up? Anyway. I think that coffee's working tonight, too. Yeah, Starbucks. I just keep going to meetings. I was just thinking. I was at this one meeting once in Scotland, and I hadn't slept on the plane. I was so jet lagged. I get to this meeting, and it was a guy, 85-year-old guy that was speaking. He had 2 years sober, and he spoke for an hour. And apparently I don't speak Scottish because I didn't understand anything this guy was saying, right? And he's just going through his story, and I'm falling asleep because I'm so jet lagged. I've got my AA cup of coffee in my hand, falling asleep. And then halfway through his story, he says, right before I got sober, I was arrested by the sex police, is what he said. Like, I woke up immediately. I'm like, A, what is the sex police? B, I'm so stoked I didn't grow up in Scotland. C, what were you doing at 83 to be arrested by the sex police, And I'm just attentive, like, listening to this guy, and I'm imagining him, like, he's tied up on this cross with rubber diapers on and all this whole thing, and he's just like, whatever. I'm just, at the end of the meeting, I always thank the speaker. I'm just like, hey, man, you got to tell me. I grew up in LA. Like, what is the sex police? And he looks at me like I'm crazy. He goes, I was arrested by 6 police, So it was a whole nother thing. But either way, at 83, it's still like a rad story, And it's like, I don't know. I just go to meetings. I just keep going to these meetings, and my life gets better. It's just incredible. Like the people that I've met, out there. And I guess like the idea of God was a little interesting, coming in here, raised Catholic. I was just, what does that mean? And my sponsor always points out, it's really important when it says God as we understand God. It's in italics, and my sponsor points out that it's very important that you can come up with your own definition of what God is, It's the thing that separated us from the Oxford group. It's the thing that separated us from the Washingtonians, It's like we have a God of our own understanding. It's incredible. I was at this one meeting in Denver, and I couldn't find it because I don't live there, and I get there late, and it's like downstairs in this basement. And there's, fluorescent lights and the same thing, just a classic, where they say they're playing my song, I guess, right out there, aren't they? And they're going around the room sharing, this one guy's sharing, and I sit down, and I'm late, and so this one guy's already talking. And then the guy next to him, halfway through his story, he stands up and he goes, "Who is your God? Who is your God?" And I asked the guy next to me, I go, "Hey man, is this AA?" And he goes, yeah, it's a born-again Christian crosstalk meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Duh. I'm like, I'm epic. I've never been to one of these before. So I was like, buckle up, you know. And every time the secretary would interrupt the guy halfway through their share when they're going around the room, like Phil from Pantera, who is your God? Who is your God? It was just incredible. And I was like, never bored, never tired. I'm like, this is the greatest meeting. I'm like, what? Can't wait for them to get to me. When are they going to interrupt me? And they get to me, and I said, I'm John. I'm visiting from Los Angeles. I said, right before I got sober, I came to out of a blackout, coming back from Tijuana, making out with this Tijuana hooker that had a face like Edward James Olmos. Which is just what happened, you know? They did not ask me who my God was, you know? They were just like, LA, welcome. All right, you know, it's just like, and I don't know if that speaks to the idea of God to you at all, but it was like, to me, it was just like this incredible like awakening. And so, you know, what happened is I got this huge life because of AA. And then, you know, and then within this 1 week, you know, I had this big job at this record company, and I was living up on the hill, and I had all this shit going on, and you know, my wife, my son was born. Which is classic, because I mean, at the same time, you know, I had. You know, it was a process with my older daughter. I met her when I was 4 years sober. She was 8 years old. That was the first time I ever met her, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Driving to Santa Cruz, sitting at the boardwalk with this little girl, taking her on the roller coasters, and just sitting with her. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I had no idea how to act, but I showed up anyway. And I sat with this little girl, and I just like hung out with her, and I went to the bathroom, and I'd say the serenity prayer. I went to the bathroom, I'd say the third step prayer, and I'd come back, and I would just hang out with her. And that was the first time I met her. And as time went on, we became friends. I'd go up visit her for her birthday, for Christmas. I'd bring her presents, you know, and we just we got close. And when she turned 18, she called me up, and well, you know, before that, it was like, they say, what's a living amend? You know, being able to take an opportunity that presents itself in the middle of life and use it to help another person. And, you know, I found out when she was in high school, her favorite band was Hanson, which wouldn't have been my first choice, but whatever. And my band at the time was, you know, randomly in Germany playing this Top of the Pop show with Hanson, and I'm like, I gotta meet this guy. Taylor's her favorite guy, and I go knock on their dressing room door, and Taylor answers the door, and I'm like, hey man, can you just like leave a message on my daughter's answering machine, because you know you're her favorite person on the planet. And we call up, and he says, hey, I just met your dad, Ashley. I just want to say I think you're awesome. This great message. I think you're awesome. Your dad's great. He was the sweetest kid ever. And her mom got home from shopping, and Ashley was at school, and they get the message, and she calls the school, and she's in class. My daughter's in class. And what the principal did is play the answering machine message over the PA at the school. And Ashley said she fell out of her chair, hysterically crying. And you know, she's got 3 kids now. And she goes, that was the best day of my life, even to this day. And it's like, you never know how these moments can come, and you can just, how you can, they can affect other people. And it's like, you know, so my daughter at 18, she called me, and she said she was pregnant, and my first thought was, you're going to end up just like your mom, who's miserable in Sacramento. And what came out of my mouth is, how can I be of service? How can I be of service? And, you know, so my wife was pregnant with my son at the time. So my granddaughter is older than my son, which is straight up Jerry Springer. It's just straight up. It's the best. And you know, so when my son was 9 months old, like, you know, I was living up on the hill, and my boss got fired at Warner Brothers, so everyone underneath him lost their jobs, and my son was diagnosed with kidney cancer. That same week, my dad died, my dog died, and we had to move. And I moved into the UCLA cancer ward, and AA showed up. AA showed up for me and brought meetings every day in the hospital. And we said the third step prayer as he was going down to get his kidney removed. And I was crying my eyes out, begging God to save my son when he was a little baby. And you know, what happened is they took out his kidney, and it was a cyst that was growing on it, and it wasn't cancer. And I was, but since then he's had all these learning differences and all this stuff. And at the same time, we're having to move from this house that, the only house that we had lived there for 10 years. We had to downsize, and we had to, move to the valley, which was like, I remember I went to the Brentwood workshop meeting, and I talked to this old timer. I go, dude, we have to move from the west side to the valley. And he goes, the valley, that's where dreams go to die, is what he said to me. I'm like, thanks, bro, thanks a lot. And we moved out there, and I just couldn't connect. I was driving over the hill to go to meetings. I couldn't connect to AA. I went to a ton of meetings, and I just couldn't connect. And I just started getting this depression just hit me. And it was like, and I remember I went to Mario's, and I said, man, I told my friend John Robinson, who since passed away, I said, John, I've just got this like depression. I can't seem to, I've doubled up my meetings. I've doubled up new sponsees. I'm in the middle of AA, but I just can't shake this thing. And he goes, it's always darkest right before it turns pitch black, is what he said to me. And I'm like, thanks, John. And I drive back home, and I call my sponsor. I'm on the 405, and I call my sponsor, and I go, John, I just, this depression won't go away. I'm just thinking about killing myself, and I can't stop thinking about it. And I have AT&T at the top of the 405, so I drop the call, of course. I call him right back. He goes, I thought you killed yourself. He's a funny guy. And I call my Al-Anon sponsor, and he said, this is what I want you to do. I don't care how you feel, homicidal, suicidal. I want you to go outside in your own backyard, raise your arms to the sky, and say out loud, I love my life. And I'm like, I was on the phone with him. I'm like, it doesn't say that anywhere in the big book. I'm like, this thing is never going to work. I'm never going to trick myself into feeling something different than I do. And I didn't do it. And my life got darker and darker and smaller over the next 2 months. And one day I just said, I'm going to try this stupid thing that's never going to work. I'm just going to go in my own back. So I'm in my own backyard facing the fence. And I'm like, and at the same day I was interviewing this kid to intern for me, and he shows up a half hour early, unbeknownst to me. My wife let him in, and I'm facing the wall. I'm like, oh, I love my life, And then I look over, and there's this 17-year-old kid. He's like, I love my life too, He didn't get the job, but, it's like, ultimately, you never know how your actions can affect other people. You never know. I didn't talk about AA or anything with this kid. I just talked about work. He calls me 5 months later, and he says, John, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Spencer. I was going to intern for you, but I've been taking pills. I can't stop. And I figured I'd call you because I saw you praising the sun god. And I thought maybe you could help me. And I took him to his first meeting at the West Side Pavilion. He's been sober ever since. That was 14, 15 years ago. It was like, you never know how your actions can affect other people. It's just like, I've got a mother-in-law because I'm married, and it's got its own set of challenges, and we've had our moments here and there, but we were at my wife's birthday this one time, and we're driving up over the hill to go take my wife out for her birthday. And, with 5 minutes, I'm going to go a different direction here. I'm going to go, I'm not. I'm going to talk about her for a second, because we're going over the hill, and I'd signed this life insurance policy this one day. And my friend says to me in the back, or I say to my friend in the backseat of the car, she's in the front with my wife. And I said, my wife's another year older. And my mother-in-law, later on, I found out she thought I said my wife's old. She turns around and she said, now that you've signed this life insurance policy, you're worth more dead than alive. And I'm like, what are you talking? I'm in the back seat, and it paused when agitated or doubtful. Pause when agitated or doubtful. But we're going about 85 miles an hour down the 405, and I'm just in my head, I'm just imagining just opening the door and just pushing her, watching her bounce down. In my head, I'm just like, pause when agitated or doubtful. I just paused the whole dinner. I paused the whole drive back home. And then we get home, and I call my sponsor, and he says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go buy a dozen roses, I want you to go to her room. I want you to tell her how much your kids love it when she comes to visit, how much your wife loves it when she comes to visit, and you wish she would come and visit more. That's what he says to me. And the thing about a 9-step, right? The second I made the decision, the resentment was gone. The second I made the decision, the resentment was gone. I had to follow it with the action. Of course, I went and bought the flowers. I knock on the room. She answers the door, and I said, she's in her pajamas, I said, Darla, my kids love it when you come. I said all of it. And then she starts crying, right? She starts crying. And she goes, John, I never thought you liked me. I don't know where she would have gotten that from, any of it. I don't know where she would have got that from, but it's like, when we talk all the time now, and it's like, we've got this, she always calls me for tech advice. It's the weirdest thing, but it's like, whatever, we just talk all the time. The resentment has been lifted because I took the contrary action. I was at the, about 14 years ago, I was at the airport I was working up in San Jose, and I was flying back with my wife and my 2 kids, and this guy sits down next to me in the lounge, about to board the plane, and he asks me, he goes, I see your boarding card says A, mine says B, what does that mean? And I look over, and he's got this LA face tattoo, and he's this gangster, like LA gang member, and I'm just like, I just said, well, A goes on the plane first, and I took out my phone, and I started fake texting like you do in those awkward situations, right? And he keeps talking to me. He's just like, are those your kids? Do they get along? How do they agree on who gets to? All these questions, I'm answering them in one-word answers, and my wife's looking at me like, should we move? But I went to a meeting that morning at 7 a.m., and I had just enough in my spiritual bank to just sit there and listen to this guy. Because the next thing he says to me, he goes, I was in prison for 17 years. I got let out this morning, and you're the first man I'm talking to. I put my phone down immediately, and I said, were you in there for drugs? And he said, yes. And I put out my hand. I said, my name's John, and I'm an alcoholic. And he shook my hand, and he starts crying. And he goes, I got sober 9 months ago in prison. I'm flying home to meet my 2 kids who I've never met, and I don't know how to be a sober father. And that's why he's asking me all these questions. But I'm responsible. When anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. For that, I am responsible. I shared with him my experience about being a sober father, And he got on the plane, and I never saw him again. Until last week, I just spoke at this meeting in Orange County, and I spoke at this convention, and they all lined up to thank me afterwards. And the second to last guy comes up to me, and he goes, I was the guy at the airport. And he goes, I've been sober ever since. I don't know what God is, because I'm just one little piece in this huge puzzle. But I just know that when I show up for these moments, that I get to be in the moment and share with another alcoholic, I get to experience some higher power in my life speaking through me. And, my son's had all these learning differences ever since that stuff happened with the cancer when he was a kid. And he's just had developmental delays and all sorts of stuff. And, 4 years ago, we always go see the Sound of Music at the Hollywood Bowl as a tribute to my father. And they have a costume contest every year. And my son, 4 years ago, he said, I want to be in the costume contest. And I worry about my son like any parent does. And I said, sure, what do you want to be? Because they dress up like characters from the movie. He goes, I want to be a female deer, like the song. I'm like, all righty. And we got him a little deer onesie with antlers, and I put one of my wife's pink bras on him, and there you go. He was a female deer. And we show up, and it's sold out, 18,000 people at the Hollywood Bowl. And he goes on stage, and he's like, I'm filming him from front of the Hollywood Bowl, and the lady's like, what's your name? He's like, I'm Julian. How old are you? I'm 14. And what are you? She's like, I'm a female deer. He said, I'm a female deer, and everyone laughs. And then, I'm just sitting there, and she goes, it's a lovely brassiere that you have on. Whose is it? He looks right at me. He goes, this is my dad's. It's so good. And And they put the cameras on me, and I'm on the Jumbotron. I'm filming them. I'm like, I could feel my face just getting red. It was so good. It's just like, I mean, don't leave before the miracle happens. I work with people all the time that need this thing, all the time in my business. I just work with people that just, they're right there, but it's like my sponsors drilled it in my head. We don't go in the dark to rescue these people. We stand in the light so they can see us. Thanks for having me today.
Let's thank our speaker, John, again. Thank you. We welcome you to return next week and encourage the newcomers to keep coming back. We have asked a friend to read A Vision for You, which is Dave. And please lead us out in a prayer of your choice. Thank you for letting me participate.
My name's Dave. I'm an alcoholic. A Vision for You. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.